Money has a way of revealing the monsters hiding in plain sight. I learned this truth on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon while debugging code at my desk, when an email from an unknown sender landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "Your husband's secret account, proof attached. Another tale awaits. But first, I'd love to know your location." Drop it in the comments, and if you're enjoying these stories, hit that subscribe button to stay connected. I'm Fiona, and until that moment, I thought I knew everything about my marriage to Brian. We were the perfect tech couple, two software developers building our dream life together, saving for a house, planning for kids. The kind of couple others looked at with envy. My cursor hovered over the delete button. Spam, obviously. But something made me click. Maybe it was the specificity of the subject line, or maybe some part of me already knew what I'd find. The PDF attachment showed transaction records spanning 3 years. Regular transfers from Brian's personal account to his mother Carol and sister Emily. Thousands each month, steadily draining our future away like a slow leak we'd never noticed. "Hey, Fi, want to grab lunch?" Brian's voice made me jump. He stood in my office doorway, smiling that easy smile I'd always trusted. "Actually," I said, turning my monitor slightly, "I think we need to talk about this." His face changed the moment he saw the screen. Not surprise, guilt. He knew exactly what I was looking at. "I can explain," he said, closing my office door. "Mom and Emily, they're struggling. Greg still can't find work, and with Tommy's therapy. 3 years," I cut him off. "You've been hiding this for 3 years. While we put off buying a house, starting a family." My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. "How much total?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Around 90,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $90,000. Our down payment. Our future. Emily posts about their vacations," I said. "Your mother just bought a new car. That's what our money is funding." "Their family," Brian said, as if that explained everything. What was I supposed to do? Tell me the truth? Let me have a say in our financial decisions? I pulled up another transaction. $2,000 last week. What was that for? Tommy's birthday party. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. $2,000 for a 5-year-old's birthday party. While we live in a 1-bedroom apartment because we're saving responsibly. Fi, please try to understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I closed the email, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. Your mother and sister have been manipulating you for years, and you've been letting them. That's not fair. They need help. They need consequences, I snapped. And so do you. Brian reached for my hand, but I pulled away. We can work this out, he said. I'll tell them we need to cut back. We'll make a plan. No, I said, standing up. You've been making plans behind my back long enough. Now it's my turn. What does that mean? I grabbed my bag, needing to get out of there before I said something I couldn't take back. It means I'm going home early. Don't follow me. I need time to think. Fiona, please. And Brian? I paused at the door. Call your mother. Tell her the gravy train is about to derail. Walking to my car, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but something else was rising to take its place. Something colder, more calculated. If Carol and Emily wanted to play games with my marriage, they were about to learn they'd picked the wrong opponent. I had 90,000 reasons to make them regret it. 3 days after discovering Brian's betrayal, I sat at his mother's dining table, watching her serve lasagna with the precision of a surgeon. Carol Thompson's dinner parties were always an exercise in careful manipulation, but tonight I saw the machinery behind her motherly smile. Emily tells me you're still renting that tiny apartment, Carol said, sliding a generous portion onto my plate. Aren't you two ready for something more permanent? I felt Brian tense beside me. We're working on it, Mom. Working on it? Emily chimed in from across the table, bouncing Tommy on her knee. But you make so much money. Both of you do. I took a slow sip of wine, noting how Greg barely looked up from his phone. The new gaming console on their entertainment center caught my eye, another gift from Brian, no doubt. Actually, I said, keeping my voice light, we've been discussing our financial goals lately. Haven't we, Brian? He coughed, nearly choking on his water. Fiona. Oh. Carol's smile tightened. What kind of goals? Starting a family, I said. Saving for a house. The usual dreams. I turned to Emily. Speaking of houses, I saw your Instagram post about wanting to upgrade. How much are you thinking of spending? Emily's face flushed. Well, with Tommy's needs. What needs? I asked innocently. I thought his therapy was covered by insurance. It's complicated, Carol cut in smoothly. Brian understands how important family support is, don't you, sweetheart? I watched my husband shrink under his mother's gaze, and something snapped inside me. Support is wonderful, I said. But there's a difference between support and exploitation. The room went silent. Even Greg looked up from his phone. I don't like what you're implying, Carol said, her voice dangerously soft. Mom, Brian started, but I placed my hand on his arm. I'm not implying anything, I said. I'm stating facts. Like the fact that Tommy's birthday party cost more than our monthly rent. Or that Emily's struggling family somehow affords weekly spa days while we put our lives on hold. How dare you? Emily's voice cracked. We're barely getting by. Greg's still looking for work. Really? I pulled out my phone. Because according to LinkedIn, he's turned down 3 job offers this year. Isn't that right, Greg? Greg's face went pale. Emily turned to him, genuine shock in her expression. Is that true? They weren't the right fit, he mumbled. Nothing ever is, I said, standing up. Thank you for dinner, Carol. But I think it's time Brian and I had an honest conversation about family. Real family. Sit down, Carol commanded. We're not finished here. Actually, we are. I turned to Brian. Are you coming? The moment stretched like glass about to shatter. Brian looked between his mother and me, years of conditioning warring with the truth he could no longer ignore. Brian, Carol's voice dripped with warning. Think carefully about what you're doing. He stood up slowly. I'm going home with my wife. The drive home was silent until we pulled into our parking spot. They'll never forgive me for this, Brian whispered. Good, I said. Maybe it's time they learned actions have consequences. What are you planning, Fi? I thought about the evidence I'd been gathering, the paper trail of manipulation and lies. Justice, I said simply. Unless you're planning to stop me? He was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. But be careful. You don't know what they're capable of. I smiled, thinking of the email I'd received that morning from Greg's last potential employer. Neither do they, Brian. Neither do they. As we walked to our apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily, "You'll regret this. Family is forever." I screenshot the message, adding it to my growing collection. They thought they were playing chess, but this was about to become a completely different game. And I was done playing by their rules. The coffee shop across from Emily's yoga studio provided the perfect vantage point. I watched her emerge in designer workout gear, Tommy trailing behind her like a forgotten afterthought. No signs of the struggling single mom she portrayed in her tearful phone calls to Brian. Look who it is, a voice said. I turned to find Greg sliding into the seat across from me, unshaven and reeking of stale beer at 11 in the morning. Stalking your own wife? I asked. He laughed, hollow and tired. Following yours, more like. Emily's been watching your moves since the dinner. Says you're trying to destroy our family. Interesting choice of words, considering what your family's doing to mine. Greg's eyes drifted to Emily and Tommy getting into their new SUV. You think I don't know what they are? Carol and Emily, they're like poison. Sweet poison. That's surprisingly self-aware for someone who's been living off my husband's salary. You found those job offers, he said. Not a question. Did you also find the ones Carol sabotaged? That made me pause. What? 3 perfect positions. Carol called each company, posed as a reference. Said I had gambling problems, drug issues. He smiled bitterly. Can't prove it, of course. But the timing was perfect, right when Emily was pregnant with Tommy. My phone buzzed, a text from Brian. Emily just called. Says Tommy's therapy got cancelled. Needs emergency money. I showed Greg the message. Therapy, huh? Tommy's never been in therapy, Greg said quietly. That's just their code for Emily's shopping sprees. The pieces clicked together. How long have they been running this scam? Since before Tommy was born. Carol orchestrates, Emily executes. They've got it down to a science. And you just let it happen? His face darkened. You think I had a choice? Try going against Carol Thompson. See how fast your life falls apart. I pulled out my laptop, opened a folder labeled Evidence. Maybe we can help each other, Greg. I've been gathering proof, bank statements, social media posts, timestamps. But I need more. They'll destroy you, he warned. Like they destroyed me. No, I said, turning the screen to show him. They'll try. But unlike you, I'm fighting back. Greg stared at the documentation I'd collected. There's something else you should see. He pulled out his phone, showed me a video of Emily and Carol in what looked like a heated argument. Turn up the volume, I said. Can't keep bleeding him dry, Emily was saying. Fiona's onto us. That little programmer thinks she can outmaneuver me? Carol's laugh was chilling. I raised Brian. I own him. And soon, we'll own that house they're saving for. Jesus, I whispered. There's more, Greg said. They're planning something big. Using Tommy as bait. My phone buzzed again, another text from Brian. Emily says Tommy's asking for us. Wants to know if we can take him for the weekend. There it is, Greg said. Phase 1. I felt cold anger settling in my chest. What's their play? They'll claim you hurt him. Or neglected him. Something just bad enough to force Brian to choose, his nephew's safety or his marriage. They'd use their own child like that? Greg's laugh was bitter. They'd use anyone. Tommy's just another pawn. I started packing up my laptop. Not anymore. I'm ending this. How? I showed him the email I'd drafted to Brian's entire family, CC'd to their employers, friends, and Tommy's school. Attached were videos, bank statements, text messages, a complete record of their manipulation. That'll destroy everything, Greg said. Including you and Brian. Sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something new. I stood up. Are you with me? He looked at Emily's car, now disappearing around the corner. What do you need? Everything you have. Every lie, every scheme, every manipulation. It's time for the truth. Greg nodded slowly. Tomorrow. I'll bring it all. As I walked to my car, another text came through, from Carol this time, family dinner Sunday. Non-negotiable. Time to discuss Tommy's future. I smiled. Perfect timing. They thought they were setting a trap, but they were walking right into mine. Sunday dinner would be memorable indeed. Let the games begin. The manila envelope sat between Brian and me on our kitchen table like a loaded gun. Greg had delivered as promised, every receipt, every manipulative text. Every calculated move his wife and mother-in-law had orchestrated over the years. They used Tommy's college fund, Brian said, his voice hollow as he read through the documents. The money I sent them every month for his future. Emily spent it on designer bags and spa treatments. I watched his hands shake as he turned another page. There's more. The therapy sessions that never happened, he continued. The medical bills they claimed weren't covered by insurance. All lies. He looked up at me, something broken in his eyes. How did I not see it? Because they didn't want you to. I pulled out my phone, showed him the video Greg had captured. Listen. Carol's voice filled our kitchen. Brian's always been soft. Malleable. Just like his father was before. Before what? Brian's voice was sharp. I hesitated. Greg sent more footage. About your father. The color drained from his face. Play it. Carol's voice again. Richard thought he could leave me. Take my son away. But I showed him what happens when you cross me. Brian never knew about the affairs I invented, the colleagues I turned against him. By the time I was done, he couldn't even get a job in another state. Brian stood up so quickly his chair crashed to the floor. She destroyed him. All those years. He didn't abandon us. She drove him away. Brian. And now they're planning to use Tommy the same way. Their own grandson. He pressed his palms against the counter, knuckles white. We have to stop them. We will. I moved beside him, careful not to touch. But you need to be sure. Once we do this, there's no going back. His phone buzzed, Emily's name flashing on the screen. He answered on speaker. Brian? Emily's voice trembled. Tommy's asking for you. He's so upset. He says he doesn't feel safe here anymore. I watched Brian's jaw clench. The old manipulation, but now we could see the strings. What happened, Emily? It's Greg. He's been drinking again, getting angry. I need you to take Tommy for a while. Maybe. Maybe permanently? Brian's eyes met mine. We both knew what this was, the trap Greg had warned us about. Of course, Brian said smoothly. Bring him over tomorrow. We'll take good care of him. After he hung up, I raised an eyebrow. You're playing their game? No, he said, a cold determination in his voice I'd never heard before. I'm ending it. Tommy deserves better than to be their weapon. They'll try to destroy us. Let them try. He picked up his phone again, dialed a number. Hello, Child Protective Services. I need to report suspected child exploitation and emotional abuse. I felt a chill. This wasn't part of my plan, it was better. What are you doing? What I should have done years ago. Protecting my nephew. He looked at the scattered evidence on our table. We have proof they're using him for financial manipulation. Neglecting his actual needs. And now they're trying to use him to blackmail us. Carol will retaliate. Good. Brian's smile was sharp. Because I just filed for a restraining order against her. The evidence you gathered, plus Greg's testimony. It's enough. More than enough. My phone chimed, a message from Greg, Emily's planning something big. Be careful. They're moving faster than we thought, I said. Brian gathered the documents, his movements precise and controlled. So will we. I'm done letting them hurt the people I love. He paused, looking at me. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Better late than never, I said, but my mind was already racing ahead. Carol and Emily's desperation made them dangerous. They'd try something drastic now that their usual tactics had failed. As if reading my thoughts, Brian said, whatever they're planning, we'll face it together. I nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring something none of us were prepared for. The game had changed, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. Emily's latest Instagram post appeared on my screen, a tearful selfie with Tommy sleeping in the background. The caption read, "Sometimes the hardest battles are fought behind closed doors. Praying for strength as my sweet boy faces another challenge. Hashtag single mom struggle, hashtag pray for us." The timestamp showed 3:47 a.m. Right after our Child Protective Services report went through. My phone buzzed, Greg's number. "She's gone," he said without preamble. "Took Tommy and disappeared. Left a note saying she's protecting him from all of us." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. When? An hour ago. Carol picked them up. I was already moving, shaking Brian awake. He sat up instantly at my expression. "They're running," I said. His face hardened as he checked his phone. 6 missed calls from Mom. Voice message. He put it on speaker. "You ungrateful children. Did you really think you could threaten us with CPS? Emily's right, you're both unstable. Don't worry about Tommy. We'll make sure he's safe from your toxic influence." Another Instagram notification popped up, Emily going live. I clicked it, my stomach churning. I never wanted to do this publicly, Emily's voice trembled perfectly. But after what happened? My own brother and his wife. The threats. I have to protect my son. Comments flooded in, "Stay strong. Praying for you." What happened? Brian's hands clenched into fists as Emily spun her tale. Our harassment, our attempts to steal Tommy, our mental instability. Each lie more calculated than the last. "They're setting us up," I said. "Making us look like the villains before CPS can investigate." "Location services," Brian suddenly said, grabbing his laptop. "Emily's phone, I'm still her emergency contact. I can track it." While he worked, I scrolled through Emily's social media history with new eyes. Every post, every sympathy-grabbing story had been building to this moment. Creating a public record of our instability, while painting herself as the victim. "Got them," Brian said. "They're heading north on the interstate. To the lake house," I realized. Carol's secret property. The one she bought with our money. Brian's voice was ice. "Perfect place to hide until CPS closes the case." My phone lit up with a text from Carol, "Last chance. Drop the CPS report, or Emily goes public with evidence of your abuse. Your choice." I showed Brian. "What evidence?" "Doesn't matter," he said. "They'll manufacture something. They always do." I opened my laptop, pulled up the folder of evidence I'd been gathering. "Then maybe it's time we go public first." Fiona. Look at the comments on Emily's live stream. Hundreds of people already think we're monsters. If we wait, their narrative wins. But exposing everything. It could hurt Tommy. The truth of that hit me hard. In my quest for revenge, had I become just like them, willing to use a child as collateral damage? My phone buzzed again. "Greg. Emily just posted your address in a private mother's group, claiming you're dangerous. People are sharing it. You need to be careful." Brian's expression changed. "That's it. That's their play. Force us to react, make us look unstable. So we don't react," I said slowly. "We let them think they've won." "What do you mean?" I started typing, my fingers flying over the keyboard. Emily's not the only one who can use social media. But instead of fighting back, we show concern. Post about how worried we are that she's disappeared with Tommy. Share resources about family trauma and manipulation. Let the truth speak for itself. Brian watched as I worked, understanding dawning. They're expecting a fight. Exactly. So we give them the opposite. While they're waiting for us to explode. We're actually following their trail to the lake house, he finished. With CPS and the police. I hit post on my first carefully worded message of concern for Emily and Tommy. Within minutes, the tone of comments began to shift. Ready? I asked Brian. He nodded, already grabbing his keys. They taught me everything I know about manipulation. Time to show them how well I learned. As we headed for the car, another notification popped up, Emily going live again. But this time, we weren't watching. We were moving. The game was changing, and they didn't even know it yet. The lake house loomed before us in the pre-dawn darkness, its windows glowing like warning signals. Brian killed the engine a quarter-mile away, and we crept closer through the woods. My phone vibrated, another message from Greg, CPS is 30 minutes out. Emily still lives streaming, claiming you're stalking them. A child's cry pierced the night. Tommy. He sounds scared, Brian whispered. Through the kitchen window, we could see Carol pacing, phone pressed to her ear. Emily sat at the table, still performing for her phone camera, tears streaming perfectly down her cheeks. And now they're threatening to take Tommy away, Emily's voice carried through the partially open window. My own brother, corrupted by that woman. Quiet, Brian hissed, pulling me deeper into the shadows as Carol stepped onto the back deck. The papers are ready, Carol spoke into her phone. Once Emily signs, the house transfer will be complete. They'll have no choice but to back off once we own their property. My blood ran cold. I pulled out my phone, checked our joint account. The down payment we'd saved, gone. Transferred to Carol's account 10 minutes ago. Brian, I showed him the screen. How did they? My passwords, he said, face ashen. Mom always knew them. I never changed. A new voice cut through the night, Greg's. He strode up the front path, Tommy's favorite stuffed dinosaur in his hand. Emily, he called out. Let me see my son. Emily appeared at the door, phone still recording. Stay back. I have a restraining order. No, you don't, Greg's voice was steady. Just like Tommy's not in therapy, and you're not a single mother. Stop lying, Emily. He's drunk, Carol announced loudly for Emily's stream. Everyone witnessed this. I'm sober, Greg said. First time in years. Clear enough to testify about everything, the fake medical bills, the manipulation, all of it. Carol's smile turned predatory. Testify? With your history of alcoholism and domestic violence? My heart sank. Of course they had documentation, probably manufactured years ago for exactly this moment. Now, Carol continued, unless you want those police reports to resurface, take your dramatic performance elsewhere. We're busy saving Tommy from actual abusers. Greg's shoulders slumped. He dropped the dinosaur and walked away, defeated. Time to end this, I whispered to Brian, stepping forward. Wait, he grabbed my arm. Too late. The motion sensor lights flooded the yard, exposing us. There. Emily shrieked, camera whirling to catch us. They found us. They're trying to break in. Carol's smile was triumphant. Right on cue. Emily, call the police. Brian, I expected better from you. Breaking and entering? Stalking? What will your employer think? You stole our house, I said, my voice shaking. No, dear. You transferred the down payment willingly, the paperwork shows that clearly. Just like the paperwork shows your history of unstable behavior and threats against Emily. Sirens wailed in the distance, but not CPS. Police. One last chance, Carol said. Drop everything, the CPS report, the accusations, all of it. We'll let you keep your jobs, your reputations. Otherwise. She held up a thick folder. These documents tell quite a story about workplace harassment, mental instability, and attempted kidnapping. Brian's hand found mine. You can't. I can do anything, Carol cut him off. I always have. The question is, how much are you willing to lose? The sirens grew closer. Through the window, I could see Tommy watching us, clutching his blanket. Emily's phone kept streaming, recording every moment of our apparent crime. "Time's up," Carol said. "Choose." I looked at Brian, saw the defeat in his eyes. Everything we'd built, everything we'd planned, gone. They'd beaten us at our own game, turned our evidence gathering against us. One wrong move now would cost us everything. The police cars appeared at the end of the drive, lights flashing. "Well?" Carol's voice dripped with victory. I opened my mouth to surrender, and my phone buzzed. "A message from Greg, check your email. Now." Carol's smile faltered as she saw my expression change. Sometimes the best revenge isn't winning the game, but changing the rules entirely. I opened the email, and hope flickered back to life. Greg's email contained a single video file. I pressed play just as the police officers approached, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Everything's on record," Carol announced triumphantly. "They broke onto private property." "Actually," I interrupted, turning up my phone's volume, "you should watch this first." The video showed Carol in her kitchen 3 years ago, coaching Emily. "Just tell Brian you need the money for Tommy's therapy. He'll never check, he trusts you. And if Fiona ever catches on, we'll say you're being abused. No one questions a victim." Emily's voice, clear as crystal, "But what if Greg talks?" "Please," Carol scoffed. "We've got enough dirt on him to keep him quiet forever." "Now, about that house they're saving for." I watched the color drain from Carol's face as her own voice continued detailing every manipulation, every planned accusation, every calculated move. Emily's phone clattered to the deck, live stream forgotten. "Where did you?" "Greg's been recording everything," I said. "For years. Insurance, he called it. Smart man." The police officers stopped, listening to the video's damning evidence. "That's doctored," Carol snapped, but her voice trembled. "Officer, they're harassing us." "The metadata's intact," I cut in. "Time stamps, location data, everything. And there's more. Every conversation about fake therapy sessions, every plan to exploit Brian's guilt, every dollar stolen from Tommy's future, all documented." "Mom?" Brian's voice cracked. "Is this true? Even Dad?" "I protected you," Carol hissed. "Everything I did was to keep this family together." "By destroying it?" Brian stepped forward. "By using my nephew as a weapon? By driving away everyone who threatened your control?" Emily burst into tears, real ones this time. "You said we were helping Tommy. You said Brian owed us." "Shut up," Carol snarled, but Emily was unraveling. "The therapy money, Tommy's college fund, that was your idea. You said." I said shut up. The back door opened. Tommy stood there in his pajamas, clutching his blanket. "Mommy? Why is everyone yelling?" The silence that followed was deafening. "Sir," one officer addressed Brian, "we received reports of stalking and harassment." "Play the rest of the video," I said quietly. "Everything's there. Including the financial fraud and conspiracy to commit theft through coercion." Carol lunged for my phone, but Brian caught her arm. "It's over, Mom. No more manipulation. No more lies. You ungrateful," she swung at him, but the officers moved quickly, restraining her. "Carol Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud." Emily collapsed onto the deck, sobbing. "Tommy, baby, go inside." "He's coming with me," Greg's voice came from behind us. He stood with 2 CPS workers, their expressions grim as they reviewed documentation on a tablet. "You can't," Emily started. "Until this is sorted out," one worker said. "Tommy needs a stable environment. Mr. Sanders has provided evidence of ongoing emotional abuse and exploitation of a minor." I watched Tommy run to Greg, saw the way he clung to his father. All the schemes, all the manipulation, and in the end, they'd forgotten the one person who mattered most. "Brian," Carol called out as the officers led her away. You can't let them do this. I'm your mother. Brian didn't look at her. Instead, he turned to me. I'm sorry, he whispered. For everything. For not seeing it sooner. Fiona, Greg called out, Tommy in his arms. Thank you. For showing me there was another way. I nodded, watching Emily being questioned by police, Carol being placed in a patrol car. The careful documentation of years of manipulation coming to light. What now? Brian asked. I took his hand, thinking of the nursery we'd planned, the future we'd fought to protect. Now we build something new. Something honest. Behind us, the lake house stood silent, its windows dark, no longer a fortress of lies, but a monument to truth's inevitable victory. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, but about refusing to let them destroy what matters most. Dawn was breaking over the water, and with it, the promise of a different kind of family. The nursery walls were half-painted when Greg's text arrived, Emily's asking to see Tommy. Says she's been getting help. I watched Brian's brush strokes falter, yellow paint dripping onto the drop cloth. We'd chosen yellow because it felt like hope, warm, uncertain, but persistent. What do you think? He asked, not turning around. Through the window, autumn leaves scattered across our new backyard, smaller than the one we'd originally planned, but ours free and clear. No manipulation, no hidden costs. I think, I said carefully, that's Tommy's father's decision to make. My phone buzzed again. A photo from Greg, his new office, his name on the door. Below it, first day as junior developer. Thanks for the recommendation. Brian set down his brush. Mom's sentencing is tomorrow. I know. The weight of that knowledge hung between us like smoke. Carol had pleaded guilty to reduced charges. But the evidence trail had led to other victims, other families she'd manipulated and destroyed over the years. The doorbell rang. Greg stood on our porch, Tommy clutching his hand. The boy wore a coding camp t-shirt, a gift from his father's new workplace. Uncle Brian. Tommy rushed forward for a hug. Dad's teaching me Python. Already? Brian laughed, genuine joy breaking through the day's tension. Watch out, or he'll be competing for your job soon. Actually, Greg cleared his throat, we wanted to show you something, Fiona. He handed me his phone, open to Emily's private Instagram. No more victim posts or carefully staged suffering. Instead, a simple photo of her therapy group, caption reading, learning to break generational patterns. Day 47. She's doing the work, Greg said quietly. Real work, not just performance. Brian touched the yellow wall, paint still wet. And Carol? Hasn't tried to contact either of us, Greg replied. The counselor says that's probably best, for now. Tommy tugged at my sleeve. Is the baby's room yellow like a duck? Like sunshine, I corrected, then caught myself. That's what Carol used to say, everything wrapped in pretty metaphors to hide harder truths. Like yellow, I amended. Just yellow. Greg nodded, understanding in his eyes. We should go. Tommy's got coding class. Wait, Brian said. The birthday party next week. If you both wanted to come. The invitation hung there, fragile as a soap bubble. Not forgiveness, exactly. Something newer, more cautious. We'll think about it, Greg said. Right, buddy? Tommy was already running back to the car, excited about his next lesson. Learning to build something, not break it. After they left, Brian resumed painting, his strokes more confident now. You know what I realized? We spent so much time trying to get revenge, we almost missed the real victory. Which was? Building this. Something true. He gestured around the nursery. Mom always said family was about loyalty at any cost. But it's really about growth, isn't it? Even when it hurts. I touched my stomach, not yet showing but full of promise. Speaking of growth. His brush clattered to the floor. Are you? Found out this morning. Wanted to wait until after tomorrow's sentencing to tell you. He pulled me close, paint-stained hands and all. Through the window, I could see Tommy waving from Greg's car as they drove away. In my pocket, Emily's latest message waited for a response. And somewhere across town, Carol prepared to face the consequences of her choices. Revenge had been my first instinct, but healing proved to be the better path. Not perfect healing, some scars would always remain. But real healing, built on truth and boundaries and the courage to start again. Yellow really was the right choice, Brian murmured against my hair. I smiled, thinking of patterns broken and new ones forming. It's just a color. No, he said. It's a beginning. Outside, autumn winds scattered more leaves across our yard. Tomorrow would bring Carol's sentencing, Emily's tentative steps toward change, Greg's new path. But today, in this room that smelled of fresh paint and possibility, we had already won something better than revenge. We had won our future.